The millionaire, on his way to his company, comes across a homeless boy at a stoplight crying and covered in bruises. Immediately he gets out of the car and is shocked by what the boy says. Michael Carter's mornings began with the precision of a Swiss watch. Each day at exactly 6 o'clock in the morning, he stepped out of his penthouse in Manhattan's Upper West Side, dressed in a tailored suit, with his dark hair combed neatly and a coffee thermos in hand. The chauffeur knew the routine. No idle chatter, no detours. Straight to the towering glass headquarters of Novatech, the tech empire Michael had built from a cramped dorm room at MIT to a billion-dollar enterprise. He found comfort in predictability. From his curated playlists to his color-coded schedule, Michael had engineered his world for maximum efficiency and minimum chaos. The city could pulse with all its madness, but inside the sleek cocoon of his tinted SUV, Michael reigned over order, or so he believed. On this particular Thursday, the sky was heavy with late winter clouds, and the streets of Brooklyn were slick from overnight drizzle. Michael rarely drove through this borough, but a last-minute board meeting at a startup incubator forced a route change. He glanced at his watch, 7:23 in the morning. The traffic light at an unfamiliar intersection turned red. That was when he saw him. At first glance, the boy was just another street kid, one of many who haunted the corners of the city, invisible to most. But something about him sliced through Michael's practiced indifference. The boy stood alone by the curb, arms wrapped tightly around his chest, shaking in a thin, torn hoodie. His face was smeared with dirt, his lips blue with cold. But it was the bruises that made Michael's stomach knot. A swollen cheekbone, a cut above the brow, and what looked like a fresh welt on the side of his neck. Then came the sound, muffled sobs. The boy wasn't crying loudly, not enough to attract attention, but just loud enough for someone who cared to notice. And for some reason, Michael did. He stared, trying to look away but failing. The boy wiped his nose with a trembling hand, then turned to cross the street. That was when their eyes met. Just for a second. Something shifted. Without speaking, without really thinking, Michael tapped the divider separating him from the driver. "Pull over." The chauffeur blinked, uncertain. "Sir?" "Now. Pull over." The car edged to the side of the road. Michael opened the... Audron stepped into the cold air, adjusting his coat. He approached slowly, aware of how he must look, a tall man in a $1,000 suit stepping out of a luxury car into a neighborhood that had not tasted luxury in decades. The boy saw him coming and flinched, backing away. His eyes darted left and right, ready to bolt. "Hey," Michael said softly, palms out. "It's okay. I just want to help." The boy didn't answer. He looked ready to run. "I'm not a cop. I'm not going to take you anywhere you don't want to go. I just..." Michael hesitated, unsure of his own motives. "Are you all right? Do you need a doctor?" The boy's voice came out cracked and quiet. "Don't touch me." "I won't," Michael replied quickly. "I promise." There was a pause, the kind that stretches too long. Then the boy whispered something, a sentence so out of place, so strange, that Michael thought he had misheard. "You promised to come back," the boy said. "But you never did." Michael blinked. "What?" The boy's eyes were glassy now, a mix of fear, accusation, and something else. Sorrow. "You said you'd come back for us." Michael's heart pounded. "I don't understand. Have we met before?" The boy didn't answer. He just stared at him with a kind of haunting familiarity, as if seeing someone who had walked out of a dream or a nightmare. "What's your name?" Michael asked, his voice lower now. The boy took a step back, but didn't run. "Ethan." The name didn't ring a bell, not immediately. But something deep in Michael's chest tightened. "I don't know you, Ethan," he said, "but I want to. Can you tell me what happened to your face?" Ethan didn't answer. He wiped his sleeve across his eyes and looked down. "Do you have anyone, parents, a place to go?" That was when Ethan looked up again and said the second sentence that changed everything. "You don't remember my mom, do you?" "Alicia." Michael's breath caught. Alicia. He hadn't heard that name. And over 20 years. Not since Baltimore, not since college. It hit him like a slap, sudden and disorienting. Michael staggered a step back. What did you say? Ethan's expression hardened, suddenly defensive. Forget it. Michael opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. The traffic light changed and cars behind his SUV began to honk. The city resumed its rhythm, uncaring. But for Michael Carter, nothing was routine anymore. He looked at Ethan, really looked, and for the first time in years felt completely unmoored. The name Alicia echoed in his ears, and everything he thought he had buried came clawing back from the dark. For most of his life, Michael Carter had perfected the art of distancing himself from the unpredictable. Emotions, for him, were liabilities, intangible variables that could not be measured, managed, or monetized. But standing in the gray morning light on a cold sidewalk in Brooklyn, the calm he had so fiercely cultivated began to unravel. The boy's voice, and raw and broken, kept repeating in his mind like a cruel echo, "You promised to come back in, but you never did." Those words, so specific and so heavy, were not the kind that came from nowhere. They carried a weight that Michael could not ignore. Ethan had already turned away, walking quickly toward the alley behind the gas station. Michael followed, hesitating only a moment. "Wait," he called out. "Ethan, please, just talk to me for a second." The boy stopped but didn't turn around. His shoulders were hunched, and his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Michael took a few cautious steps closer, careful not to startle him. "I don't know what you think I did," Michael began, struggling to keep his voice even, "but I swear to you, I don't remember meeting you. I don't remember any promise. But Alicia, if you're talking about that Alicia, I knew her a long time ago." Now Ethan turned slowly. His eyes were red from crying, but the expression on his face had shifted, from fear to something closer to skepticism. "You knew her? You think that makes it okay?" Michael's pulse raced. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to understand." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "She talked about you all the time, said you were smart, said you had dreams, said one day you'd come back, but you didn't. You left her with nothing, and now she's gone." The words struck like a blow to the chest. Michael took a step back, trying to absorb them. "Gone? What do you mean?" "She died," Ethan said simply, his voice flat, as if the emotion had long since burned out. "When I was 7. Michael felt dizzy. He gripped a metal pole next to him, needing something solid to hold onto. He opened his mouth to speak, but had no idea what to say. The fog of memory began to lift, slowly, painfully. Alicia, her laughter, the smell of her skin, the letters they exchanged during that summer, the final fight in Baltimore when everything collapsed between them. He had convinced himself she moved on, maybe married, had a better life without him. The idea that she had a child, his child, and that child now stood before him, battered and cold, was something he could hardly process. "I didn't know," Michael said finally. "I swear to you, Ethan, I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," the boy snapped. "She looked for you, I remember. She made phone calls, wrote letters, you just disappeared." Michael felt the accusations sink deep, even though a part of him wanted to protest, to explain. But the truth was he had disappeared. When Novatech began to take off, he severed ties with everything that reminded him of the fragile version of himself, including Alicia. He never looked back. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant rumble of early traffic. Michael looked down at the boy's shoes, thin sneakers, torn at the seams, soaked through from the wet pavement. How long had he been out here? How many nights had he slept in alleys or under bridges while Michael slept in five-star comfort? The contrast made his throat tighten. "Where are you staying?" he asked gently. Ethan shrugged. "Wherever I can. Shelters, sometimes under the old train tracks. Doesn't matter." "It does matter." The boy laughed bitterly. "To you? Why? Because you feel guilty now? Little late for that." "I don't know what I feel," Michael admitted. "But I know I'm not walking away from you." Ethan looked at him, searching his face for signs of deception. "You don't even know if I'm telling the truth." "I know Alicia," Michael said, and I know how this feels. I don't need more proof right now." For a moment, Ethan looked as though he might bolt again, but then his knees buckled slightly, and he sank onto the curb, suddenly looking much younger than his presumed 12 or 13 years. Michael crouched nearby but didn't sit. He sensed the boy still needed space. "I'm sorry," Michael said. "If I could go back." "You can't." Ethan didn't look at him. "She was sick. Cancer. It got bad fast. I was just a kid. I didn't understand most of it. Just that she was in pain all the time. She used to cry at night when she thought I was asleep." Michael swallowed hard. His chest felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. "She had this box," Ethan continued. "Kept it under her bed. Said it was for me, for when I was older. After she died, I took it with me. I didn't open it right away. I was too angry, too scared, but last year I did." "What was in it?" Michael asked, though he already feared the answer. "A letter," Ethan said, "with your name. Said she never stopped loving you. Said she hoped I'd find you someday, that maybe you'd care." Michael stood still, unable to respond. The air felt heavier now, thick with regret. He had built his empire from nothing, clawed his way to the top with tireless ambition and ruthless focus. And in the process, he had abandoned the one thing he now realized he might have truly needed: connection. Real, flawed, painful connection. He looked down at Ethan again. "Come with me." "Where?" "Someplace warm, safe, just to talk." "To eat. You don't have to stay, just give me a little time, that's all I'm asking." Ethan looked torn, unsure if he could trust the man who had once been just a story from his mother's past. But the cold was biting through his bones, and the bruises on his body pulsed with every heartbeat. Finally, he gave a slight nod. Michael exhaled, the first real breath he had taken since stepping out of the car. He reached out a hand. Ethan didn't take it, but he stood and followed him toward the waiting SUV. Inside the car, silence fell again. Ethan hugged his arms to his chest. Michael removed his coat and draped it around the boy's shoulders without a word. He gave the driver a new destination, a private hospital uptown, one where questions would be minimal and the care discreet. As the car pulled away from the curb, Michael stared out the window, not at the buildings but at the reflection of the boy beside him. A stranger, a ghost, a possibility. The armor he had worn for decades had cracked, and through that fracture, something very human was beginning to emerge. The silence inside the hospital waiting room was of a kind Michael Carter rarely experienced. Not the productive quiet of focus or the anticipated hush before a presentation, but the brittle, uncertain kind that filled the spaces where truth had yet to be spoken. Ethan sat wrapped in a wool blanket provided by the triage nurse, eyes downcast, hands tucked beneath the fabric. He hadn't said much since they arrived. Michael, still wearing the tension of their earlier conversation, stood by the window with his arms crossed, watching the soft drizzle blur the city beyond the glass. He had insisted on bringing Ethan to a private facility where he could be seen immediately and without judgment. The sight of the boy's injuries, the bruising around his ribs, the half-healed cuts on his arms, had sent a cold current through Michael's veins. The doctor who examined him had been professional, offering no comment on how the injuries came to be, though his glance at Michael had carried an unspoken question. Michael didn't answer. He couldn't. He didn't. "Know anything?" "Not yet." Ethan shifted slightly, drawing Michael's attention back to the small couch where the boy sat. There was something in the way his eyes darted to the floor, refusing to meet Michael's gaze, that reminded him of Alicia. Not her laughter, which had been bright and unrestrained, but her silences, those moments when her thoughts grew too heavy to voice. Seeing that same expression now on the face of a child chilled him to the core. "You hungry?" Michael asked softly, his voice nearly lost in the sterile hum of the room. Ethan gave a faint shrug. "I'll have someone bring food," Michael added, more to fill the space than out of necessity. He pulled out his phone, but Ethan's next words stopped him cold. "You don't remember her at all, do you?" Michael looked up. "I remember her." "Then why do you look so confused when I say her name?" Michael moved closer, choosing his words carefully. Because it's been a long time, Ethan. Over 20 years. And the Alicia I remember was someone I thought I'd never see again. I didn't expect to hear her name today. Especially not from you. Ethan's eyes narrowed. She told me you were smart, but maybe not that smart if you don't know who I am. I'm trying to understand, Michael said, sitting on a chair across from him. I need you to help me. The boy hesitated, then drew a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to revisit something he'd locked away. She met you in Baltimore, right? Michael nodded. We were both at Johns Hopkins. She was studying literature. I was working on computer science. She said you were always tired, that you worked all night but never missed your classes. Michael smiled faintly. That sounds about right. She liked you, Ethan continued, said you made her laugh, but then you argued. She said you left angry, that you never answered her letters. Michael's smile vanished. I didn't. Get any letters? Ethan's jaw tensed. That's what she said might happen, that maybe you'd moved on. There it was again, that unbearable weight in Michael's chest. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Ethan, I'm going to ask you something difficult. I need you to tell me the truth. The boy nodded, guarded. Are you saying Alicia was pregnant when I left? Yes, Ethan said without flinching. She found out a few weeks after. She didn't know how to find you. Said you didn't leave a number, just an email, and it stopped working. Michael exhaled slowly. His mind reeled with fragments of memory. Alicia's last message, a stormy night, a misunderstanding they never resolved. He had buried that time so deeply, he'd convinced himself it no longer mattered. But now, the consequences of that silence sat just feet from him, bruised and alone. She didn't want to tell me your name when I was little, Ethan said. She said it would hurt too much if I spent my life waiting, but she kept this old envelope. Had your name on it. Michael Carter. She told me not to open it unless something happened to her. Michael swallowed. What happened to her, Ethan? Lung cancer, the boy replied. She never smoked, but something in her lungs went wrong. She started getting sick when I was 5. By the time I was 7, she was gone. The room grew colder, though the thermostat hadn't changed. Michael leaned back, his eyes stinging. And you've been on your own since then. I bounced around some foster homes, a shelter, got hit a few times. Some places were worse than others. Michael clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay composed. Why didn't you call anyone, a social worker, anyone who could help? I tried, Ethan said, more quietly now, but it got worse every time. So I stopped. I ran. Michael nodded slowly. And the letter? I kept it hidden. I didn't open it until I was about 11. When I read your name, I started looking, but it's hard. I didn't have a phone, no computer, just the name Michael Carter. And let me tell you, there are a lot of you out there. Michael allowed himself a dry, bitter chuckle. Yeah, I imagine so. But I saw you once, Ethan said suddenly, eyes lighting with something like clarity. On a magazine. You were getting some award. I was at this gas station and someone left a copy behind. When I saw your name and your face, I knew it was you. Michael tried to picture the moment, his carefully staged photograph in Forbes or Business Weekly, an image of power and precision. The thought that it had reached a boy in the street, alone and searching for a piece of his past, made his stomach twist. That's why I stayed around here, Ethan continued. I figured maybe I'd see you again. Michael ran a hand through his hair, now thoroughly disheveled. And now that you have? Ethan shrugged again. I don't know. I didn't think it would actually happen. I just wanted to say what I had to say. Michael didn't respond right away. He stood, walked to the window again. The city hadn't stopped moving. Traffic flowed, horns blared in the distance. People hurried by below. But his world had irrevocably shifted. I can't change the past, he said after a long pause, and I can't erase the years you spent out there. But I'm here now, and I don't want to walk away again. Ethan looked at him, skeptical but silent. There's more I need to know, Michael said, and I think you have questions too. But for now, let's take this, one step at a time. I want to read that letter. I need to see it. Ethan nodded, slow and cautious. It's not far. I hid it near this old building I used to sleep in. I can take you there. Michael met his eyes, and for the first time, there was no distance between them. "Then that's what we'll do," he said. And for the first time in many years, Michael Carter followed someone else's lead. The wind that sliced through the Lower East Side of Manhattan that evening carried the sharp sting of winter's final defiance. Michael Carter stood beside Ethan as they walked through cracked sidewalks and alleys that reeked of forgotten promises and lives scraped together in the shadows. The boy led them with the certainty of someone who had walked these paths too many times, ducking under a chain-link fence, avoiding a rusted shopping cart with practiced ease. Michael followed in silence, his polished shoes already scuffed and soiled, each step driving home the distance between their worlds. They reached an old industrial building, long abandoned, its broken windows like hollow eyes watching the decay around it. Ethan climbed through a gap in the side wall with nimble ease, gesturing for Michael to follow. Inside, the air was stale, soaked in mildew and dust. A pile of cardboard and rags marked where someone, maybe many someones, had tried to make a space livable. Ethan crossed to a rusted filing cabinet tucked into a corner, its drawers jammed and dented. He knelt beside it and reached into the gap behind it, groping in the darkness. When he pulled his hand back, it held a weathered envelope, yellowed, at the edges, stained by time and moisture. He handed it to Michael without a word. Michael hesitated, fingers hovering over the flap. There was a strange reverence in the air, like he was about to disturb a sacred thing. He sat slowly on a low concrete block, using the light from his phone to read. The letter was written in Alicia's distinct cursive, strong but slanted, full of emotion in every stroke. Her words spoke of a love never truly extinguished, of regret and of quiet resilience. She recounted their time together with painful clarity, the late-night walks, the promises whispered in the dark, the ambitions they both chased with equal hunger. Then came the part Michael had not dared to imagine, the moment she realized she was pregnant. She wrote of the fear she felt, the way she held on to the belief that he would want to know, that he would come back, but after weeks passed with no reply. After calls and emails went unanswered, she gave up. She moved to a smaller city, tried to build a life for herself and her unborn child, working in diners, then offices, whatever she could find. She named the boy Ethan, and she poured all her love into raising him, always believing deep down that one day she would find Michael again. The letter ended with a plea. "If you ever find this," she wrote, "please do not turn away from him. He is everything I have, everything I've ever done right. Let him know he was always loved by both of us." Michael felt the words hammer into him. He pressed the envelope to his chest and closed his eyes. Memories he had buried under decades of ambition, noise, and distraction now returned in a torrent. Alicia's voice, her laughter, the way she challenged him, how she looked the night they fought, angry, hurt, but still so full of fire. He had never written back, never checked in. His email had changed when he shifted to corporate accounts. Her letters, if they came, were likely lost to the churn of his rapidly ascending life. He had built a palace of silence and decorated it with excuses. "I didn't know," he said, voice hoarse. "I swear to you, Ethan, I didn't know." Ethan didn't respond at first. He was crouched near the wall, knees drawn to his chest, watching Michael like someone unsure whether to believe what he was seeing. "I read that letter more times than I can count," Ethan finally said. "Sometimes I thought it was just something she wrote to make me feel better. I didn't think you were real." Michael looked at him, heart breaking anew. "I wish I'd been there. I wish I had known. I would have come." Ethan's expression remained unreadable. "You say that now, but you weren't. Not for her. Not for me." There was no defense to offer. Michael could only sit with the truth, letting it settle in his bones like frost. He thought about all the times he had measured his success in numbers, revenue, stocks, square footage. None of it prepared him for this reckoning. None of it taught him how to speak to a boy who had spent his formative years thinking he'd been abandoned. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Michael said. "I don't even know if I deserve that. But I want to make things right, whatever that looks like, not just with money, it's with time, with presence." Ethan looked down at the floor, his voice barely a whisper. "She used to talk to me about you like you were a story, like some kind Of hero. I used to imagine what you looked like, thought maybe you were off saving the world. I wasn't, Michael said quietly. I was building a company. I convinced myself that was enough, that it mattered more than anything else. They sat in silence for a long time. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, then faded. The city, uncaring, moved on. Eventually, Michael stood and reached out a hand. Come on, let's get out of here. Ethan looked at the offered hand, then slowly took it. His grip was colder than Michael expected, and it made him realize just how long the boy had gone without warmth. Not just physically, but emotionally. Back in the car, Ethan leaned against the door, clearly exhausted. Michael watched him in the reflection of the window, studying his features, the jawline, the shape of the eyes. There were echoes of Alicia there, yes, but also shadows of himself. The realization both comforted and haunted him. Do you have a place to stay tonight? Michael asked. Ethan shook his head. Then you'll stay with me, just for the night. We'll figure things out tomorrow. The boy didn't argue. They returned to Michael's penthouse as the sky began to darken. The doorman raised an eyebrow at the unexpected guest but said nothing. Upstairs, Michael showed Ethan the guest room, complete with its own bathroom and a view of the skyline. Ethan stood awkwardly in the doorway, not quite believing any of it. There's clean clothes in the closet, Michael said. They might be big, but they'll be warm. Ethan nodded and disappeared into the room. Michael stood in the hallway. For a long moment, his heart still unsteady. Later, he sat alone in the living room, the envelope resting on the coffee table. He read the letter again, slower this time, letting every word etch itself deeper into his memory. This was no longer just about guilt. It was about rebuilding something he had never even realized was broken. He had found a son in the most unlikely place, at the most unlikely time. And now, for the first time in a very long time, Michael Carter didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But he knew one thing: he would not look away again. Michael woke before dawn, as he always did, but the rhythm of his morning had already shifted beyond recognition. No alarm, no early treadmill run, no black coffee brewed on schedule, only the persistent hum of thought and the weight of the letter still burned into his memory. He sat in the kitchen, nursing a lukewarm cup, staring at the skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city was waking up slowly, indifferent as always, its towers and noise untouched by the private revolutions happening behind its glass walls. A soft creak made him turn. Ethan stood at the threshold of the kitchen, wrapped in an oversized hoodie, hair tousled, eyes wary. He looked younger in the morning light, not like a boy hardened by life on the streets, but like any other teenager, forced to grow up too soon. "Morning," Michael said quietly. Ethan didn't reply right away. He looked around the immaculate space, unsure where to stand. Eventually, he settled against the far counter, arms crossed. His presence in the penthouse still felt surreal, even to Michael. It was a world Ethan clearly didn't trust, and perhaps never would. "Did you sleep at all?" Michael asked. "A little." Michael gestured to the other stool. "You want something to eat? I can order breakfast." Ethan shook his head, then after a pause added, "Not hungry." Michael didn't press. They sat in silence again, but it was less tense than before, more like two people learning to occupy the same space. Michael had 1,000 questions, each vying for attention, but none felt right to ask yet. He sensed Ethan was carrying more than bruises and fatigue. There were stories hidden behind his guarded eyes, stories that had yet to surface. After a while, Ethan broke the silence. "I don't know what you want from me." Michael turned to him. "What do you mean?" "This," Ethan said, gesturing around the kitchen, then to himself. "Me being here. You acting like this matters. You didn't know about me, you had no reason to care, but now you do? Why?" Michael took a breath. "Because I should have known. Because I missed everything. Your mother tried to reach me, and somehow I never got the message. And now I'm sitting here with the consequences of that silence. You didn't ask for any of this. Neither did Alicia. But I did. I made choices that kept me from finding you." Ethan looked away, his fingers tracing a line along the edge of the counter. "You said you didn't know about the letter." "I didn't," Michael confirmed. And I believe you when you say she wrote to me. Maybe someone intercepted it. Maybe it got lost. I don't know yet. But I know it doesn't change the fact that I wasn't there. There was a long pause before Ethan spoke again. She used to cry at night, he said quietly. Thought I didn't hear her, but I did. Especially when she got sick. She tried to be strong for me, but I saw it every day. The pain, the fear. And after she died, no one cared. They put me in a group home for a while, then a foster family. That lasted a few months before they kicked me out. Michael's hands tightened around the coffee mug. After that, Ethan continued, I just stopped trying. Shelters, streets, abandoned buildings. Sometimes I'd find a good spot. Sometimes I got hurt. Sometimes people tried to take things. Sometimes they did. I stopped counting after a while. Michael closed his eyes. His empire, the meetings, the stock options, the conferences and investments, all of it seemed meaningless compared to the years this boy had survived alone. The thought of Alicia dying without support, of Ethan navigating a world that punished the vulnerable, filled him with a rage he didn't know what to do with. You shouldn't have had to go through that, Michael said, his voice low. But I did. And I can't erase that, but I want to give you something different now. A place where you don't have to sleep with one eye open. Food that's not stolen or scraped together. Clothes that fit. A future. Ethan's expression was unreadable. Why now? Why do you suddenly care? Because I can't not care, Michael replied. Because I'm your father. The word landed like a stone in the room. Ethan blinked, flinched slightly, then looked down. Michael wondered if it was the first time anyone had said it to him aloud. I'm not asking you to call me that, he added quickly. Not yet. Maybe not ever, but it's the truth. Ethan didn't answer, but his silence felt less like rejection and more like processing. Michael gave him time. Eventually, Ethan said, I still have the rest of the stuff. From her, it's not much, just some drawings, a photo or two. They're hidden in the same place where I kept the letter. Michael nodded. Do you want to get them? I think so. They went together, this time in daylight. The building looked even more desolate under the morning sun. Ethan moved, quickly, leading Michael back through the same narrow path. Behind the old filing cabinet, tucked beneath a bundle of newspapers and cloth, he retrieved a battered shoebox wrapped in plastic. Back at the penthouse, they opened it together. Inside were small, intimate remnants of a life Michael had never known. A faded photo of Alicia holding a baby in a hospital bed, a pair of infant socks, a hand-drawn birthday card with Ethan's, scribbles from years past. Michael took the photo gently, studying Alicia's face. She was tired but radiant. The boy in her arms, newborn, eyes shut, unaware of the long journey ahead, was Ethan. She talked about you a lot, Ethan said, watching Michael's reaction. Said you were brilliant. Said if you ever came back, I should try to forgive you. Michael blinked back the heat in his eyes. She was always too generous. She believed in second chances. I hope she's right, Michael whispered. That night, Ethan stayed in the guest room again. Michael stood at the door for a while, unsure if he should say something else, but Ethan had already curled up under the blanket, facing the wall. Michael watched a moment longer, then turned off the light and closed the door. In his own room, he sat in the dark, the letter and photos spread before him. So much lost, so much he never knew. But something new was beginning, and though it was fragile and uncertain, it was real. The past was no longer buried. It had found its way back to him in the form of a boy who bore his name in silence and sorrow, and Michael was determined not to let him go again. The next days unfolded in quiet, awkward intervals. Michael, who had spent most of his adult life speaking fluently the language of metrics, deals, and calculated outcomes, now found himself floundering in the simplest human interactions. The rhythms of his home had shifted. The silence of his penthouse was no longer serene but thick with tension, filled with the unspoken weight of a boy who occupied the guest room, drifting through the days with practiced detachment. Ethan remained distant, neither hostile nor trusting, a quiet presence who appeared for meals and then disappeared into long hours of solitude. He barely touched his food, responded to questions with one-word answers, and flinched whenever Michael came too close emotionally. The distance between them was not spatial but temporal, years of absence that no amount of warmth or luxury could quickly bridge. On the fourth evening, Michael returned home earlier than usual. He had cancelled 3 meetings, ignored half, a dozen calls from his board, and left his executive assistant with vague instructions. The company would run without him for a while. What mattered now was behind the door he opened carefully. Ethan was seated cross-legged on the guest bed, a collection of Alicia's belongings spread before him. The shoebox was open. Inside were more than just memories. It was a capsule of lost time, a testament to resilience and forgotten connection. Michael stepped into the room slowly. "Can I come in?" he asked. Ethan nodded, not looking up. Michael sat on the edge of the bed, a safe distance away. His gaze drifted to the contents of the box: a frayed scarf, a pressed flower between 2 pages of a novel, a small gold chain with a heart-shaped pendant. He recognized the book. Alicia had read it during their final summer together. She used to recite passages aloud, laughing at the characters, mocking the overwrought language. Seeing it again felt like a jolt to the chest. "I remember that," he said softly. Ethan's fingers brushed the edge of the cover. She kept everything. Michael reached into the box with care and pulled out the letter, the one Ethan had first shown him. He read it again, not for new information, but for the ache it brought. Every word felt like a breath from the past, pressing against his present. "I should have been there," he said quietly. "I keep saying it and I'll keep saying it because it's true. I don't know how the letters got lost. Maybe someone intercepted them. Maybe it was bad luck. But it doesn't matter. I wasn't. There, and that's on me." Ethan's expression remained neutral, but his voice was softer than before. "She tried. She looked for you." Michael nodded. "And I was too busy building something that I thought would matter. I thought success could make up for all the things I left behind, but now I'd give it all up just to go back and make a different choice." There was a long silence, filled only by the distant hum of city traffic outside the window. Then Ethan reached into the box again and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, not part of Alicia's original letter, but something different. He handed it to Michael without explanation. Michael unfolded it slowly. It was a copy of a medical document, a diagnosis. Alicia's full name was printed at the top, followed by the words, "Non-small cell lung carcinoma, stage 4, the C." Date was over 7 years ago. Below that were treatment recommendations, insurance notations, and a brief comment in the margin. Patient declined further intervention due to lack of resources. Michael's stomach turned. He traced the words with his eyes, feeling each one as a wound. She had died not just from illness, but from isolation and poverty. In the years he had hosted galas and closed deals worth millions, Alicia had faced death alone, choosing between chemotherapy and food. The injustice burned through him. "She never said anything to me about how bad it got," Ethan said. "Not until the end. She used to smile even when she was throwing up, said we were going to be fine." Michael couldn't speak. The image of Alicia suffering in silence, protecting her son even while her own body failed her, was too much. He folded the paper carefully and handed it back. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he said finally. Ethan looked at him, eyes unreadable. "I don't know if I can give it, but I don't hate you. I wanted to for a long time. But when I saw your face at that stoplight, I didn't feel anger. I felt scared. Like everything I believed about my life was suddenly upside down." Michael nodded, understanding. "It was for me too." The next morning, Michael made a decision. He dressed in casual clothes, a rare occurrence, and asked Ethan if he wanted to come with him to the office. The boy hesitated, clearly uncertain, but eventually agreed. At Novatech, they were met with surprised stares. The staff had never seen Michael accompanied by anyone outside his professional circle. He walked through the halls without explanation, Ethan close behind, both of them navigating a space neither fully understood. Michael led him to his private office, a sprawling corner room filled with minimalist furniture, floor to ceiling, windows and an air of cold efficiency. Ethan walked to the window and stared out. "You really built all this?" Michael came up beside him. "I did. Took me years, sacrificed a lot." "It's impressive," Ethan said, "but it feels empty." Michael smiled bitterly. "You're not wrong." Later that day, he had Ethan sit in on a meeting just to observe. He watched as Ethan listened, wide-eyed, to the executives debate numbers and projections. There was a moment when Michael caught Ethan glancing at the charts, a curious frown on his face. "You understand any of this?" Michael asked during the break. "Some," Ethan admitted. "I like numbers. I used to help at a food bank. I handled their inventory sometimes. It's kind of the same, just bigger." Michael raised an eyebrow. "You like math?" Ethan shrugged. "Yeah, when I get to use it." That night, Michael couldn't stop thinking about it. The boy had potential, raw, unshaped, but real. And for the first time, Michael allowed himself to think beyond guilt, beyond grief. He thought about possibility. As they returned home, Ethan asked if they could read Alicia's letter again together. Michael nodded. They sat on the living room floor, both of them cross-legged like school children, and read her words slowly, aloud. Each line felt like a thread tying them together, weaving something fragile but new. By the time they finished, the air between them had shifted. Ethan didn't say much, but he didn't pull away when Michael placed a hand on his shoulder. The abyss Alicia left behind was deep, but in her letter, she had left something more than memory. She had left a bridge, and they were starting to cross it, one word, one step, one broken piece at a time. Michael began to change his routines, not gradually or reluctantly, but with the kind of decisive energy he usually reserved for corporate takeovers. He stopped setting morning meetings. He cancelled appearances. He started preparing breakfast instead of having it delivered. Each day he made small but deliberate gestures to let Ethan know he was choosing to be present, even if the boy hadn't asked for any of it. At first, Ethan watched it all with the skepticism of someone who had learned not to expect anything consistent from adults. He didn't trust routines. In his world, they rarely lasted. People left. Promises dissolved. So he kept his distance, testing Michael's intentions by absence as much as by words. But over time, that distance began to shrink, not through dramatic gestures or heart-to-heart confessions, but in subtler ways, sitting a little longer at the dinner table, accepting the hoodie Michael bought without complaint, asking questions about the city skyline at night. Michael, for his part, tried not to push. He read parenting books in secret, devoured forums filled with advice from fathers who had reconnected with lost children, and consulted a therapist, discreetly, of course. None of it gave him an exact formula, but one piece of advice echoed, in his mind, consistency over intensity. So he kept showing up even when Ethan responded with silence. They started playing chess in the evenings, a game Ethan had picked up in shelters and parks. Michael discovered quickly that the boy had a sharp mind, full of unexpected strategies and a calm under pressure that reminded him of top-tier negotiators. Their games became a ritual, a space where neither had to speak too much, yet each move conveyed something unspoken. One evening, after Ethan defeated him for the third time in a row, Michael leaned back with a chuckle. "You know, most people would at least pretend to let me win." Ethan smirked, then shrugged. "You're the one who taught me not to waste potential." Michael froze, surprised. "When did I say that?" "You didn't," Ethan said. "She did. Mom said that's what you always told her." Michael smiled, the memory bittersweet. She wasn't wrong. That small exchange lingered with him for days. He found himself looking at Ethan differently, not just as a boy he had failed to protect, but as someone with his own strength, shaped by hardship, yet not hardened beyond reach. And in those moments, Michael felt something shift inside him. Guilt was still there, but it had begun to make room for hope. Yet not everything was so simple. On the surface, the atmosphere in the penthouse grew warmer, but underneath it all, Ethan struggled with a storm of feelings he couldn't yet name. He wanted to believe Michael. He wanted to trust that this man who had walked away, even unknowingly, could somehow be part of a better future. But trust wasn't a switch. It was earned slowly and painfully, and part of him feared that this too would fade. That fear came to a head late one night when Ethan couldn't sleep and found himself wandering the apartment. He passed by Michael's study and heard his voice, low and intense, speaking on the phone. Ethan paused just outside the door. "I know the board is getting impatient," Michael was saying, "but I'm not coming back full-time yet. There are more important things right now." There was a pause, then Michael added, "No, I won't put him in a program or boarding school. I'm not handing him off to someone else. That's not negotiable." Ethan stepped away before Michael noticed him. He returned to his room and stared at the ceiling, trying to process what he'd just heard. The words weren't dramatic, but they struck deeply. Michael was choosing him. Against pressure, against expectations. It didn't fix everything, but it planted something new. A seed of belief. The next morning, Ethan spoke before Michael could. "I quit some meetings for me." Michael looked up from his coffee, a bit startled. "I adjusted my priorities. That's not the same as quitting." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like it." Michael smiled, setting the mug down. "Would it be a problem if I did?" Ethan hesitated, then shrugged. "Just not used to people doing that." "Well, get used to it," Michael said. "I'm not going anywhere." Days later, Michael brought home a form from a local private school, one with flexible entry programs for students with interrupted education histories. He handed it to Ethan during lunch, not with pressure, but with a quiet suggestion. "Take a look," he said. "They have math programs you might like." Ethan stared at the packet. He flipped through it slowly, then said, "You really think I can just go to school again? Like normal?" "I think you can do anything," Michael said, "and normal's overrated." Ethan didn't answer right away, but he didn't reject the idea either. That alone was progress. Still, the past clung to both of them. One afternoon, Ethan asked to visit his mother's grave. Michael agreed without hesitation. They drove, in silence, to the small cemetery, tucked between city blocks, quiet and unassuming. Ethan led the way, stopping at a modest headstone marked with Alicia's name and dates. Michael stood behind him, hands in his coat pockets, watching the boy kneel beside the stone. "She deserved better," Ethan said after a long time. "Yes," Michael agreed. "She did." Ethan pulled something from his pocket, a folded note. He placed it at the base of the grave, weighed down by a small stone. "What is it?" Michael asked. "Just stuff I never said out loud." Michael nodded and said nothing more. As they left the cemetery, Ethan spoke again. "You didn't forget her, did you?" "No," Michael replied. "I tried to, but I never really did." Back home, the silence between them felt different. Not awkward, just settled. Later that week, while Michael was in the kitchen, Ethan appeared with a question that caught him off guard. "Can I keep the room?" Michael turned from the stove. "Of course. I mean, not just for now, I mean like for good, if that's okay." Michael crossed the room in 2 steps and pulled him into a hug before he could finish the sentence. Ethan stiffened at first, then slowly returned the embrace. "It's yours," Michael said, "for as long as you want." The journey was still long. Neither of them had all the answers, but in that moment something changed. Not a dramatic transformation, but a turning point. A boy once abandoned had asked to stay. A man once too busy to look back had been given a second chance. And both of them, scarred but willing, took another step forward together. The calm Michael had worked so hard to build was shattered one morning by the buzz of his phone, a storm of missed calls and flashing notifications that hinted at something far more severe than a mere business disruption. He sat at the dining table, sipping his coffee while Ethan prepared cereal in silence, a small but meaningful shift from their first awkward breakfasts together. The boy was beginning to make himself at home, slowly and cautiously. Michael had dared to believe they were finally on steady ground. Then his assistant called. "You need to see this," she said without preamble. "It's everywhere. Page 1 of the tabloids, blogs, news aggregators, even a few business sites." Michael frowned, unlocking his tablet and typing quickly. Within seconds, the headline hit him like a punch to the chest. "Millionaire Tech. Mogul discovers homeless son on the streets of New York." Accompanying the headline was a photo, grainy but unmistakable. Michael outside his SUV, standing beside a boy who looked disheveled, bruised and vulnerable. The image captured the moment before Ethan had said his first haunting words. His chest tightened. The article had just enough truth to make it dangerous. It spoke of a mysterious boy, possibly the illegitimate son of one of the wealthiest CEOs in the tech world. It detailed his life on the streets, the rumors of a mother long dead, and the sudden reappearance of Michael Carter in his life. There were no confirmed sources, but there were enough vague allusions to Alicia, their past and Michael's name to ignite the media's frenzy. Ethan looked up when he noticed the shift in Michael's face. "What is it?" Michael didn't know how to answer, so he handed the tablet over. Ethan read the headline, his expression unreadable at first, then slowly clouded by shame. "They found us," he said quietly. "I didn't think they'd care." Michael stood, pacing now, his mind racing with possibilities. Who leaked it? Someone from the hospital? A Novatech employee? Or just a random bystander who happened to recognize him and snap a photo? "I'll handle it," Michael said, but the words felt hollow. The damage had already begun. By midday, the story had exploded. Paparazzi lingered outside the building, reporters called every hour demanding statements, and his public relations team was in full crisis mode. Investors wanted answers. Executives wanted explanations. Shareholders wanted to know how a personal scandal could affect the future of their money. At first, Michael tried to shield Ethan from it. He turned off the TV, silenced notifications, and instructed building security to keep the press away. But Ethan wasn't naive. He saw the tension in Michael's jaw, the way he answered every call with a clipped tone and a tired sigh. The boy had grown up navigating threat and instability. He knew when trouble was looming. The breaking point came 2 nights later. Michael returned from an emergency board meeting, his tie undone, his face pale with frustration. He opened the apartment door and immediately sensed something was wrong. "Ethan?" he called. No answer. He searched each room, but the boy was gone. The guest bed untouched. The window in the hallway slightly ajar. A note rested on the kitchen counter, scribbled on notebook paper. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause problems. I thought this could work. But I don't belong here." "Michael," I stood frozen, the note trembling in his hands. He read it again and again, hoping he misunderstood, but the meaning was clear. Ethan had run. He called the security desk, but they hadn't seen the boy leave. He checked every message, every email, looking for clues. Then he remembered the old building, the one where Ethan had hidden Alicia's things. Michael grabbed his coat and ran out, hailing a cab with urgency that left no room for questions. The abandoned structure looked darker than before, haunted, now by the possibility of absence. Michael climbed through the gap, calling Ethan's name. Nothing. Dust swirled in the shafts of moonlight cutting through broken windows. He searched every corner, every makeshift bed, but found no sign. Desperate, he began to search places he never imagined himself visiting: shelters, soup kitchens, drop-in centers for youth. He offered no explanation other than a photo and the boy's name. Some people recognized the face. One man, a security guard at a shelter downtown, remembered him from weeks ago. "He came by a couple times," the man said. "Quiet kid. Stayed out of trouble." "Did he come back recently?" The guard thought for a moment, then nodded. "Might have seen him yesterday, couldn't say for sure. Place gets crowded. You check the community center on Canal Street." Michael hadn't. He went there next, driven now by more than fear, by something primal and aching. The possibility of losing Ethan after only just beginning to understand him was unbearable. The community center was warm, crowded, filled with voices. Michael stepped inside and scanned the faces, uncertain what he was hoping for. Then near the back wall he saw him. Ethan sat alone at a table, arms folded, staring at nothing. Michael crossed the room in a few strides. "Ethan." The boy looked up, startled at first, then wary. "How did you find me?" "I've been looking everywhere." Ethan shifted in his seat. "I didn't think you would. You've got a company, a reputation. Why would you chase after a screw-up kid who brought this on you?" Michael sat across from him, ignoring the stares. "Because you're not a screw-up. and because I care more about you than I care about any of that." Ethan didn't speak, but his eyes glistened with something unspoken. Michael continued, his voice low and steady. "You didn't cause the problem. The story was going to come out eventually. And even if it hadn't, I still would have chosen you. Every time." Ethan's throat moved as he swallowed. "They hate you now. I saw the stuff online." Michael smiled grimly. "Let them. What matters is right here." They sat in silence until Ethan whispered, "I was scared." "I know," Michael said. "Me too." He reached out, placing a hand on the table. Slowly, Ethan moved his own hand toward it. When their fingers touched, it wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. It was quiet, like the calm after a storm. A moment of fragile understanding, suspended in time. That night, they returned home together. The paparazzi still waited, the emails still piled up. But Michael didn't care. His world was shifting again, and this time, he wasn't afraid to let it. The next few days passed in a haze of tension and effort, with Michael balancing a collapsing corporate image and a fragile relationship that now demanded everything he had left. His assistants were drowning in press inquiries. His legal team warned him of upcoming depositions from activist
investors. The firm hired to manage the crisis had already of televised interviews and strategies.
But for the first time in his career, Michael wasn't interested in salvaging a brand. He was focused on saving something far more valuable, a connection. Ethan remained withdrawn after his return. He spent long hours in his room sketching, or pacing, his usual walls re-erected higher than before. Michael gave him space but not distance. Every day he checked in, offering conversation, food, or simply his presence, a steady rhythm Ethan could begin to rely on. It was not dramatic, it was not fast, but it was real. Then one afternoon, while Michael was cleaning out a neglected storage unit near the office, trying to discreetly remove any personal materials the media might twist, he came across a sealed envelope buried inside a folder of old correspondence from over 20 years ago. His name was typed on it. The return address, Baltimore. The sender, Alicia Marlowe. Michael's breath caught in his throat. Hands trembling, he opened the envelope. The letter inside was short. Alicia's handwriting, clear and unmistakable, spilled across the page. She had written it during her second trimester. She didn't ask for money. She didn't threaten or beg. She simply wrote that she wanted him to know that a part of him would soon exist in the world, that she hoped if he read the letter, he would do what he thought was right, whatever that turned out to be. Michael sat on the edge of a plastic crate, frozen. He had never seen this letter, not once, and then a realization struck him like a bolt of ice through his spine. The unit had been managed, at the time, by administrative staff from his early startup days, back when Novatech was just a few desks and borrowed offices. He remembered then, painfully, how much of his life he had entrusted to one particular man, Robert Sims. Sims had been his co-founder, his partner in everything during those chaotic early years, ambitious, ruthless, a master at managing optics and trimming emotional fat from decisions. He had also been the gatekeeper of Michael's schedule, his mail, and as it turned out, his personal affairs. For years they had worked in lockstep, until a falling out 5 years prior had driven them apart. Michael left the unit immediately, letter in hand, and returned to the penthouse. Ethan was in the kitchen making tea. "I need to tell you something," Michael said. The letter held like evidence in his hands. Ethan turned, his eyes already registering the tension. "I found a letter," Michael continued, "from your mother, from back when she was pregnant. She sent it. She tried to reach me, but I never got it. It was buried in my storage unit, and I think I know who hid it." Ethan watched him closely, saying nothing. "There was a man I trusted," Michael went on, "back then. A business partner. He managed everything, my meetings, my mail, my calendar. He was loyal to the company, not to me. He thought emotions were weaknesses. I think he found the letter and decided I didn't need to see it, that it would distract me, that Alicia wasn't part of the life I was supposed to have." Ethan's jaw clenched. "He decided that for you?" Yes, Michael said, but I let it happen. I didn't pay attention.
I let people make decisions for me and I never questioned the letter to Ethan. The boy read it slowly, lips moving silently with the words. When he finished, he folded the paper carefully and placed it on
the table. I always wondered, he said, if she really tried, if she wanted you to know. She did, Michael replied. And I want you to know that I'm going to confront this. I'm going to face him, and I don't care what it costs me. That night, Michael wrote an email to Sims, now a high-level executive on Novatech's board. He requested a private meeting. The reply came within an hour, a brief, clinical agreement. The following morning, Michael entered the boardroom with a copy of the letter in hand. Sims was already there, calm, dressed immaculately, his expression unreadable. The years had only sharpened his air of superiority. I assume this is about the article, Sims said, sitting down. It's about a letter, Michael said, placing it on the table. A letter you hid from me. Sims's eyes flicked to the paper but did not change. I don't know what you're talking about. Michael sat across from him. You intercepted it. 20 years ago, Alicia sent it. You kept it from me. Sims leaned back, folding his arms. Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, would you have read it? You were busy building a company, falling in love. With the idea of success, she would have derailed that. She was part of my life. You had no right. I had a responsibility, Sims said coldly, to protect Novatech from unnecessary complications. Do you think investors would have lined up behind a founder distracted by an old flame and... A baby? Michael stood. You stole 20 years from me, from my son. For the first time, Sims's face twitched. You're making this about emotion. You always warned me not to do that. And I was wrong, Michael said. About that. About you. He left the boardroom without another word. That afternoon, Michael submitted a formal complaint to the board, requesting a vote of censure. He didn't expect them to follow through, but it didn't matter. The point was to speak the truth, loudly, publicly. When he returned home, Ethan was on the couch, flipping through a math book Michael had ordered. The boy looked up, brows raised. I talked to him, Michael said. And? He didn't deny it, said he was protecting me. I filed a report. Might not change anything legally, but I wanted you to know. Ethan nodded slowly. Thanks. There was more silence, but not the uncomfortable kind, the kind shared by people who now understood each other. Later that night, as Michael stood in the kitchen pouring water, Ethan appeared beside him. You said you lost 20 years, the boy said. I lost them too. Michael met his eyes. I know. Ethan hesitated, then added, but we've still got time, right? Michael's voice caught. Yes, we do. And for the first time, the silence between them didn't echo with loss, but with promise. The boardroom had never felt like a place for heartbeats. It was all marble floors, glass walls, and the sterile elegance of a power palace, a space designed to suppress anything human in favor of metrics, projections, and cold strategy. Yet, on that Tuesday morning, as Carter walked toward the heart of Novatech's headquarters with Ethan beside him. Heartbeats were all he could hear. Ethan wore a dark hoodie under a simple jacket, his hands tucked in his pockets, chin down, shoulders stiff. He wasn't sure why Michael had asked him to come along, and truthfully, he wasn't sure why he'd agreed. But something in Michael's voice the night before, steady, stripped of every defense, had made him curious. Michael, in contrast, was unusually silent. No tailored suit today, no briefcase. Just a simple navy coat and a letter folded in his pocket. Alicia's original message, now laminated, its ink protected from the elements and time, but not from memory. The elevator dinged, and they stepped out onto the executive floor. Inside, the board was already assembled. A mix of sharp eyes, graying temples, and impeccably pressed suits. They were ready for damage control, ready to hear Michael's strategy to recover Novatech's plummeting image. But what they got was something else entirely. He didn't take the seat at the head of the table. Instead, he stood beside the screen and looked each of them in the eye. You know me as the man who built this company, he began. From a laptop in a shared dorm room to a building with our name on it. You know my decisions, you know my wins, you know my failures. He paused, unfolding the letter slowly. "But you don't know this." The room was silent. No one shifted. No one breathed too loudly. Michael held up the letter. This was written over 2 decades ago by Alicia Marlowe. She was someone I loved, someone I lost, and someone I failed. She wrote to tell me she was pregnant. I never got this letter because someone in this company, someone I trusted, decided to protect the brand instead of the truth. There were sharp glances exchanged. No names were said, but everyone understood. Michael turned to the side and gestured. "This is Ethan," he said. "My son. The person I didn't know existed until a few weeks ago. The person who has endured more than any child should ever have to, and who stood in the rain one morning, cold, hungry, and bruised, while I sat in the back seat of a luxury car, wondering if I should roll down the window." No one dared interrupt him. I made mistakes, terrible ones. I buried the past because it was easier to manage my future without it. I chased a version of success that cost me things I didn't even realize I had lost. And now I'm standing here not to apologize to you, because none of you deserve that apology, but to tell the truth. Because if I keep hiding, I'm no better than the people who made those choices for me. The board chair cleared her throat. "Michael, this isn't the time or the place. It is exactly the time," he interrupted. "And this is the place. Because the moment we start treating truth as a liability, we stop being human. I don't care what the stock does tomorrow. I don't care how the press spins this. What I care about is this boy right here, who didn't ask for any of this, but who showed me what it means to be accountable." He turned to Ethan now, lowering his voice. "I can't undo what was done. I can't bring your mother back. But I can stand with you here now. I can stop hiding behind polished surfaces and clever messaging. And I can be your father. Not just in name, but in presence." Ethan blinked slowly, absorbing every word. His throat tightened, but he didn't look away. Michael faced the board again. "I know what some of you are thinking, that this makes me unstable, that I'm a PR risk, that I should step back, and maybe you're right." He exhaled, slow and deliberate. "So here it is. I resign as CEO of Novatech, effective immediately." A collective intake of breath echoed around the room. Even Ethan's head snapped up in disbelief. "I'll stay on as a consultant for transition if needed," Michael continued. "But I'm done leading a company while ignoring my own life. I built this place so I could one day be free to live. That day is now." He placed his access badge on the table and walked toward the door, Ethan beside him. But before he left, he paused and looked back. "One last thing. If anyone ever tries to use this boy's name against me or weaponize his existence for corporate leverage, I will come back and I will burn this place to the ground. With words, not fire, but it will be scorched all the same." He left to stunned silence, the weight of his departure hitting harder than any scandal. Outside, the air felt cleaner, not because the sky had cleared, it hadn't, but because Michael was no longer walking beneath the weight of pretense. Ethan followed him quietly for a block before finally speaking. "You didn't have to say all that." Michael turned. "Yes, I did." "You really quit?" "Yes." Ethan stared at him. "For me?" "For us," Michael said. "For your mother. For the person I should have been all along." They walked for a long time. No destination, just movement. At a small cafe near the river, they sat at a window booth and ordered sandwiches and coffee. Ethan didn't say much at first, but eventually he asked, "Do you think she would have been proud?" Michael looked out at the water, then back at him. "I think she would have said, 'It's about time.'" They both laughed, quietly but genuinely. For the first time, the noise of the city faded around them. No headlines, no boardrooms, no shadows from the past. Just a man and his son sitting across from each other, beginning something new in the ruins of what might have been. The fallout from Michael Carter's public resignation was swift, sharp, and unpredictable. While some news outlets praised his vulnerability and candor, others capitalized on the chaos, spinning narratives of emotional instability and failed leadership. The tech world had never been gentle with fallen giants. And Michael's departure from Novatech gave them fresh fodder. Commentators dissected his speech frame by frame. Podcasts speculated about his motives. Investors questioned if this was a calculated PR stunt or the unraveling of a once unshakable mind. Inside Novatech, the boardroom's atmosphere thickened with distrust and ambition. Michael's departure left a vacuum, and in the cold calculus of corporate succession, nature abhorred a vacuum. At the center of this opportunistic tide stood Robert Sims, the same man who had buried Alicia's letter all those years ago. Cold-eyed and relentless, Sims moved quickly. He stepped into the interim CEO role before the ink on Michael's resignation was dry and immediately began reshaping the narrative. His first move was subtle but intentional. A leaked internal memo described the transition as a return to strategic clarity, emphasizing stability over emotional volatility. Then came a closed-door meeting with Novatech's PR firm, followed by selective leaks to the press suggesting that Michael's connection to Ethan had become a source of distraction affecting leadership decisions. The implication was clear. Michael's personal life was not just private, it had endangered the company. Michael heard about the first wave of insinuations through a former colleague who still respected him. The man's message was short but heavy. "They're spinning it against you, thought you should know." Michael read it in silence, his jaw tightening. He had expected backlash. What he hadn't expected was the depth of betrayal. The very man who had stolen a piece of his past, now threatening to distort his present. That evening, Michael and Ethan sat together in the apartment, quietly reading. Ethan was becoming more comfortable in the space, though he still moved with the caution of someone who knew comfort could be temporary. Michael didn't want to break the peace, but the silence between them felt like the wrong place to hide the truth. "They're coming after me," he said at last. Ethan looked up. "Who?" "The board. Sims. They're trying to turn this whole thing into a scandal, saying I left because I was unstable. That finding you made me reckless." Ethan's shoulders stiffened. "You didn't do anything wrong." "I know that, but the truth isn't what they're after. They want control. They want to clean the narrative before the next shareholders' meeting." Ethan sat back, his fingers curling around the edge of the sofa cushion. "Are they going to hurt you? I mean, not physically, but everything you built?" Michael considered the question. "They can try, but I'm not going to let them erase what matters." Later that night, Michael drafted a statement. Not for the press, not yet. Just for himself. A clear, unapologetic summary of events from his point of view. He outlined the timeline, the letter, Sims's interference, and the choices that led him to step down. It wasn't a legal document. It was a record of truth. He didn't release it. Not yet. Instead, he turned his attention to something more immediate, protecting Ethan. He hired a security consultant to review their building's privacy protocols, installed new encryption software on their home devices. He began teaching Ethan how to recognize manipulation in media, how to protect himself online. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. If Sims and the board were willing to exploit Ethan's existence to weaken Michael's credibility, then the boy deserved tools to defend his own. But despite the external threats, life inside their home slowly grew warmer. They developed routines, cooking dinner together, even when it ended in burned rice or undercooked chicken. Watching old movies that Michael had never seen because he'd been too busy. Ethan showing him obscure documentaries and math puzzles online. They debated everything, from philosophy to pizza toppings, and though trust was still cautious, it was growing, layer by layer. Then came the invitation. It arrived in a thick envelope, gold-embossed, from the Novatech Foundation, the annual Winter Gala. Michael was surprised to receive one, given his resignation. The gala was a lavish fundraiser, attended by the elite, the powerful and the hungry. The note inside was brief. "You're always part of our family." Michael knew who had sent it. Sims. It was bait. He debated not going. He considered burning the envelope. But then he saw Ethan watching him, waiting to see what choice he would make. So Michael made one. "I think we're going," he said. Ethan blinked. "Seriously? You've never worn a tuxedo, have you?" The boy smirked. "I've Barely worn clean jeans. Michael smiled. Then we'll change that. The week leading up to the gala was a whirlwind of fittings and adjustments. Michael insisted on a custom-tailored suit for Ethan, even as the boy resisted, complaining. It was unnecessary. But when the final version arrived, Ethan stood in front of the mirror for several minutes, speechless. He looked older, taller, almost confident. "Not bad," he admitted. "You look like you own the room," Michael said. "And you haven't even walked into it yet." On the night of the gala, the ballroom shimmered with opulence. Crystal chandeliers, live music, carefully curated lighting. Michael walked in with Ethan beside him, both dressed in black with sharp lines and polished shoes. The crowd turned, some with curiosity, some with skepticism, some with open admiration. Sims spotted them from across the room and came to greet them, smiling with the ease of a predator pretending to be a host. "Michael," he said, extending a hand, "glad you could make it." Michael shook it without flinching. "Wouldn't miss it." "And this must be Ethan," Sims said, looking the boy over. "You clean up well." Ethan didn't respond. Michael leaned slightly forward. "You know, Robert, the thing about cleaning up, it always reveals what's been hidden underneath." Sims's smile didn't falter. "Enjoy the evening." As they moved through the room, Michael whispered to Ethan, "That was for him. But this night is for us." They danced, laughed, met old colleagues who treated Ethan with surprising kindness. Michael gave a short speech when prompted. Nothing political, just a thank you and a promise to invest in programs for homeless youth. By the end of the night, Ethan looked more tired than he let on, but also, for the first time, proud. Back home, as they removed ties and loosened collars, Ethan said, "You're not afraid of him, are you?" Michael looked at him. "Not anymore." "Good," Ethan said, "because I'm not either." Whatever threat Sims had hoped to plant at that gala had backfired. Instead of weakening Michael's stance, it had strengthened something more important. It had shown Ethan that his existence was not something to be hidden, and it had reminded Michael that no empire, no legacy, no boardroom mattered more than the truth, especially when it walked beside him, learning how to stand tall. The days following the gala brought a strange kind of quiet to Michael Carter's life, not silence in the literal sense. His phone still rang, the city still pulsed beneath his windows, but a calm that came from within, as though he'd finally stepped off a treadmill he hadn't realized he was running. He no longer woke up with an agenda dictated by share prices or quarterly projections. Instead, his mornings were shaped by simpler things. The sound of Ethan's footsteps as he padded into the kitchen for breakfast, the faint laughter from the living room when they watched old sitcoms, the low hum of the world continuing without, demanding his participation in its chaos. But peace, Michael knew, was rarely permanent. News arrived midweek that the board was moving forward with a formal vote to appoint Robert Sims as Novatech's permanent CEO. The press began to treat Sims as a visionary returning order to the company, while painting Michael as a cautionary tale, a genius undone by sentiment. Despite the malicious undertone, Michael felt no desire to respond. He had made his decision, and for the first time he had no regrets. But he also knew something Sims did not. The full story hadn't yet been told. And when the moment came, Michael was ready. It happened during a nationally televised interview, one Sims had arranged to cement his leadership image. The host, a sharp-eyed journalist known for digging deeper than most, asked about Michael. "Do you think Michael Carter's departure was in the company's best interest?" she asked. Sims smiled, the kind of smile Michael had once trusted, now soured with hindsight. "Michael was an extraordinary innovator," he said, "but sometimes personal challenges cloud professional judgment. Our focus is stability and long-term growth." The next question was about Ethan. "There have been rumors," the host pressed, "about interference in Michael's personal affairs, especially concerning a letter from Alicia Marlowe. Can you speak to that?" Sims faltered just for a second. "I wouldn't want to speculate on private matters," he said, "but I can assure you Novatech values integrity. Always has." The clip aired in the evening, and within hours, Michael received hundreds of messages, Some supportive, others curious, a few accusatory, but none of them moved him. What mattered most was the boy sitting beside him on the couch, remote in hand, expression unreadable. "You okay?" Michael asked. Ethan shrugged. "They don't know anything." "They will," Michael said, "but on our terms." The next morning, Michael issued a statement, not through a press agent, not on social media, but in person. He requested an interview with the same network that had hosted Sims. They accepted without hesitation. In a modest studio, under warm lights, Michael faced the world one more time. "I'm not here to defend my past," he began, "or to attack anyone. I'm here because I believe the truth deserves a place in public memory. Not spin, not branding, just truth." He laid out the full timeline, Alicia's letter, Sims's obstruction, his own failures, and his resignation. He described the moment he found Ethan on the street, not as a heroic act, but as a reckoning. He didn't cry, he didn't dramatize, he just spoke, plainly and fully. "I stepped down because I couldn't lead a company while learning how to be a father at the same time. One needed all of me. I chose my son, and I'll choose him every day." The host asked what he wanted now. Michael thought for a moment. To build something new. Not a company, a life. The interview went viral. For days, headlines softened, public opinion shifted. Investors still favored Sims's ruthless style, but the public began to see Michael not as a fallen mogul, but as a man who chose something, rare responsibility. And Ethan? He watched it unfold from a distance, still wary of attention but no longer hiding. One evening he came to Michael's office, now just a small room in their home, free of the sleek Novatech polish. "I've been thinking," Ethan said. "Maybe school's not such a bad idea." Michael looked up. "You ready?" "Not really, but I don't want to sit around forever." Michael smiled. "Fair enough. Let's find something that fits." They toured schools. Some were too rigid, others too chaotic. But eventually they found a small institution on the outskirts of the city, focused on individualized learning, known for taking in students who had fallen through the cracks. The principal, a wiry woman with sharp eyes and a gentle voice, asked Ethan only one question. "What do you want to learn?" Ethan hesitated, then answered, "How to stop feeling like I don't belong." She nodded. "That's a good place to start." Enrollment was arranged. Classes would begin in 2 weeks. In the meantime, Michael and Ethan began a different project, restoring Alicia's memory. They revisited Baltimore, found the apartment where she once lived, the bookstore she had worked in, even an old neighbor who remembered her fondly. They gathered photos, stories, pieces of the woman they had both lost, but never forgotten. In the evenings, they worked on a scrapbook. Michael with his meticulous structure, Ethan with sudden bursts of creativity. It wasn't therapy, but it was healing. One night, as they sat sorting through a pile of papers, Ethan looked up. "Do you think she'd be okay with all this?" Michael didn't hesitate. "I think she'd be proud of you." Ethan smiled, faint but real. "She always said people weren't just what they survived. They were what they did with the survival." Michael nodded. "Then we're on the right track." Later that week, they stood in front of a newly placed bench in a city park. It bore a simple plaque, in memory of Alicia Marlowe, fierce, kind, and never forgotten. They sat in silence, watching the world pass by. People laughed, ran, argued, lived, and in that quiet corner of a busy city, a man and his son rested side by side, not broken, not perfect, but finally whole enough to begin again. Michael reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the original letter. He handed it to Ethan one more time. "You want to keep it?" Ethan looked at it for a long time, then nodded. "It belongs to both of us," he said. And as the wind moved gently around them, they stayed seated, not as a businessman and a runaway, but as a father and son, rewriting the end of a story that had once seemed so tragically inevitable. Spring arrived quietly, without the fanfare that Michael once associated with change. No sudden resolutions, no dramatic reinventions, just small signs of life returning. Trees unfurled their leaves with slow defiance against winter's retreat. Sidewalks filled again with music, conversation, and motion. And in the quiet suburb where Michael had moved with Ethan just weeks earlier, the air felt different. Less like a retreat, more like a beginning. Their new house was modest by comparison to the penthouse. No sweeping skyline, no concierge or security detail. Just 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that always smelled faintly of coffee, and a backyard wild with potential. Michael had chosen it for its distance from the city's noise and from Novatech's looming shadow, but also because, for the first time, he was choosing a place not for status but for comfort, for healing, for possibility. Ethan adjusted slowly. He missed the elevator rides, the endless view of the city at night, and even the strange elegance of Michael's old life. But he didn't miss the feeling of being observed, of tiptoeing through rooms where everything looked expensive and breakable. Here, things could be touched, lived in. The floor creaked in the hallway. The sink gurgled when it drained. But when he dropped a plate, Michael didn't flinch. He just handed him a broom. They were still learning each other. Mornings were quiet.